The dog stopped. Just like that. Wade Carrick knew something was wrong the moment Kodiak froze mid-stride. 1 second, the old German Shepherd canine was trotting ahead along the icy ridge like always, ears perked, nose low, tail swaying with purpose. The next, he planted all four paws in the snow, lifted his head, and growled. Deep, low, primal. Wade felt his gut knot. Kodiak didn't growl without reason, not anymore. Not since they'd both stopped chasing ghosts and started hiding from them. The early April wind howled across the Montana highlands, carrying the scent of pine, ash, and old things buried beneath frozen earth. Wade squinted through the mist, scanning the tree line where Kodiak's nose pointed. Nothing moved. No birds, no deer, no signs of life. Just the long shadow of a forgotten winter that refused to leave. Easy, boy, Wade whispered, fingers tightening around the stock of the rifle slung across his back. Show me. Kodiak didn't wait. He bolted down the slope, quiet, fast, efficient. The instincts of 1,000 training hours kicking in like a ghost of the war they both tried to forget. Wade followed, boots crunching over icy brush, heart pounding the way it used to back in Kandahar, Basra, Helmand, places he never talked about unless whiskey forced it out of him. They weren't supposed to be out here today. Just a short morning walk, he told himself. A way to stretch the old dog's legs and silence the dreams Wade hadn't shaken since the letter arrived. But now they were off trail, deeper than he'd been in weeks. Kodiak weaved through trees like he was chasing a scent. That nose hadn't failed him in 10 years of combat, search, and rescue. It wasn't failing now. 10 minutes in, the trees broke open, and there it was, half buried in a slope of earth and snow. An ancient door curved into the hillside, round, wooden, worn smooth by decades of wind and weather. Moss grew thick along the stone frame, and what little glass still clung to the side windows was shattered and webbed with ice. A cracked brass handle glinted beneath layers of frost. Wade stopped cold. You've got to be kidding me. He'd seen this place before once, 30 years ago. He was just a boy, tucked in the back seat of his dad's Jeep, winding through Montana roads on some fishing trip that wasn't really about fishing. They'd stopped here just for a moment, and his father, a man of few words and long silences, had stared at this hill with something close to reverence in his eyes. This place, his father had said, belongs to a ghost. Wade hadn't understood it then. He wasn't sure he did now. Kodiak sniffed the air, circled the door, then sat down, like a soldier reporting target located. Wade approached slowly, eyes narrowing as he reached for the handle. Locked. But it didn't feel like an ordinary lock. The metal was ice cold, not from the weather but from within. Like the cold came from the house itself. He dropped to one knee, ran a gloved hand over the seams. That's when he saw it. The entire lock was frozen over from the inside. Not frost, not surface ice. This was deeper. Crystalline. Thick as a whiskey glass, and there were patterns inside it. Swirls, ridges, almost like carvings, almost like writing. What the hell is this place? He took a step back and pulled the folded letter from his coat. Yellowed paper. Heavy. Stamped with an attorney's seal from Billings, Montana. To Mr. Wade Carrick, you are the named beneficiary of the estate of Eleanor Hartwick. Property, 23 acres. Residence, 1. Located near Red Lodge, Montana. Effective immediately. Keys enclosed. No explanation. No background. Just coordinates, a key, and a name he hadn't heard since his dad vanished in 1997. Eleanor Hartwick. Supposedly a second cousin on his father's side. Never met her. Never got a card, a letter, a call. But her name was in one of his father's old burn rolls, scribbled in a list of people to protect. Kodiak barked once, sharp and alert, then growled again. Wade spun. A crow exploded from the trees, screeching. Nothing else followed. Still, the forest felt wrong now. Like they weren't alone, like someone, or something, had been waiting for them to find this place. Wade turned back to the door. The key Eleanor's lawyer had sent was old, black iron, heavy as a bullet. He pulled it out, brushed away the frost, and slid it into the lock. It didn't turn. He tried again. And firmer this time. Still nothing. Kodiak let out a low whine, pawing the frozen ground. All right, Wade muttered, pulling his multi-tool from his coat pocket. Let's chip away at some ghosts. It took him 15 minutes of careful scraping. The ice fractured in strange geometric shards, like broken quartz. When he finally heard the click, it echoed like thunder. The door creaked open slowly, groaning on its hinges. A rush of stale air spilled out, cold, metallic, and tinged with something Wade couldn't place. Inside was darkness. Not just absence of light. This darkness felt dense, like it had been waiting a long time. Wade turned on his flashlight. A circular room stretched before him, walls carved from stone and earth, ceilings held by thick wooden beams. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Furniture sat under white sheets, hunched like sleeping animals. Shelves lined the walls, books, equipment, boxes, and 3 doors stood spaced evenly around the far curve of the room, each one sealed with ice. Thick, bluish-white ice, spreading across the wood like veins, not random, patterned, designed, protective. Kodiak stood beside him, silent now, ears forward. Wade stepped inside. 1 step, then 2. The door creaked behind him and shut with a dull thud. He was in. He didn't know what Eleanor had left for him or why his father had whispered her name in his sleep during the last few weeks before disappearing. But whatever was behind those frozen doors, it was meant for him. And Kodiak had brought him here for a reason. As Wade stepped further into the cold silence of the hidden room, he didn't hear the soft click of a motion sensor activating above the main door. But Kodiak did, and he turned his head slowly toward the ceiling, tail stiff, body alert, his eyes fixed on something Wade hadn't noticed yet. A camera, still glowing, still live, and someone was watching. The camera had no blinking red light, no sound, no motion. But Wade Carrick had seen enough covert systems in his time to know when something was live. This one was mounted just above the archway, barely noticeable, tucked into a carved wooden beam. Not store-bought, military grade, old, maybe Cold War era, but upgraded. Someone had eyes on this place. He killed the flashlight. "Stay," he told Kodiak, who froze like a statue in the dark. His training never left him. Wade moved slowly, silent over the stone floor, eyes adjusting to the low light. The air was colder now, denser. The firewood stacked in the corner looked dry, but untouched for years. No recent human presence. Yet that lock, the camera, it told a different story. He found the circuit breaker in a hidden panel behind a bookshelf, old-school switches and a manual override. Half the circuits were dead, but a few still hummed. Backup power, probably a battery bank somewhere in the walls. Wade flipped the switch labeled interior lighting. Dim lights flickered to life across the ceiling. Circular recessed lamps, warm-toned, built directly into the curvature of the stone. The room glowed like a buried cathedral. Kodiak didn't move from his spot, but his ears perked up. That's when Wade noticed the envelope. It sat dead center on the mantel above the fireplace. A thick manila folder sealed with a crimson wax stamp he hadn't seen since basic training. The mark wasn't military, though. It was older. A crest, a mountain peak split by a lightning bolt. Below it, in cursive script, "To Wade Carrick and no one else." He stepped toward it, picked it up. The wax was already cracked. Inside, a letter, written by hand, neat, precise. "If you're reading this, Wade, then I've either died or disappeared. Or both. This place was never meant to stay buried. Not forever. The key found you just like I knew it would. What you'll find here is not just mine. It was your father's too. You deserve to know why he left and what he tried to protect. But be warned, if you're here, others are watching." There was no signature. But the handwriting, it matched the back of an old photo Wade carried in his wallet. A black and white image of his father in uniform, standing with a group of men in front of a mountain cabin. Written in the corner, just one name. Eleanor. Kodiak growled again, not loud, not aggressive, just alert. Wade turned. The wind outside had stopped. That stillness, it wasn't right. He crossed to one of the 3 frozen doors. Ice encased them like armor, translucent, uneven, and impossibly thick. He touched the surface with his gloved hand. Freezing, but no frostbite sting. It felt otherworldly. Kodiak patted over beside him, nose lifted, ears twitching. Then he whined, just once. "Smell something?" The dog stepped closer to the far right door, the thickest ice, and began sniffing hard. Then he pawed at the floor, circling. Something was under there, buried. Wade pulled out his folding knife, knelt, and scraped the stone where Kodiak pointed. After several minutes, he found it, barely visible beneath the layer of ancient grime. A faint metal plate, no handle, no keyhole, just a small ridge at the edge. He jammed the tip of his blade under the seam and lifted. It creaked, just a hair, then popped open. Inside, a compartment no larger than a cigar box. Wrapped in cloth, a small bundle sat waiting. Wade pulled it free, hard hammering. Inside, a handheld radio. Military issue. No dust. Recently cleaned. And a note. Frequency 1123. Cold silence is the loudest kind. The radio had power. Fully charged. It didn't make sense. Nothing about this did. Wade turned it on, dialed to 1123. Static. Then, a click, followed by a faint, garbled voice. Low, can anyone read? Station Bravo requesting update. Hartwick site triggered. Repeat, Hartwick site. Silence. Then more static. Wade turned the radio off. He stared at Kodiak. I don't think we're alone, boy. And that's when the knock came. 3 sharp raps on the outer door. Wade didn't breathe. No one should have been able to follow them up here. He hadn't told anyone where he was going, not even his VA contact. The road was unplowed, the last leg barely passable. The whole trail was hidden, unmarked. This cabin didn't even show up on Google Earth. It was blanketed in trees. Another knock. Wade Carrick? A man's voice, polite, clear, but too calm. I'd like a moment of your time. I believe you're the new custodian of the Hartwick property. Kodiak bristled. No bark, just quiet tension. Wade stepped back, pulled the rifle from the rack near the mantel, chambered around silently. Outside, the voice continued. My name's Whitmore, James Whitmore. I'm a private researcher. My family's been involved with this site for generations. I'd prefer we spoke peacefully. I have documents you'll want to see. Wade kept the door shut. Not interested, he said, firm. There was a long pause. Then, with unnerving cheerfulness, Whitmore said, Of course, I respect privacy, but you might reconsider once you learn that this land sits on top of a restricted geological vault. Something your great-aunt never had the right to claim. Something your father died trying to protect. Wade froze. You're bluffing. Am I? Another pause, then, tell me, Wade, did you know what was sealed behind the third door? Did Eleanor tell you what it can do when the ice melts? That was enough. Wade swung open the hidden rifle slot near the doorframe, took aim at the side window. No visual. He stepped away, breathing hard. Whitmore was gone. No retreating footsteps. No engine. Just the faint scent of burnt ozone in the air. Kodiak backed toward Wade, body low. They waited. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. Wade finally opened the door a crack. Outside, snowflakes drifted lazily. Empty forest. But one thing had changed. Pinned to the outer door was a photo. A black and white surveillance image. Of Wade, asleep in the VA hospital 3 years ago. The timestamp read, Denver, room 407, 3:14 a.m. Below it, scribbled in pen, It's already begun. The dog will know. Wade stared at the image until his hands went numb. Then he closed the door, locked every bolt, and sat down hard on the stone floor, Kodiak pressing in close to his side. This wasn't just about a house anymore. Someone had been watching them long before Montana, before Eleanor died, before the key arrived. Kodiak licked Wade's knuckles. He wasn't just sniffing old wood. He'd sensed something buried long ago. And Wade, whether he was ready or not, had just walked into a legacy drenched in secrets. A legacy that was now waking up. Wade didn't sleep that night. He sat on the cold stone floor beside the fireplace, rifle across his lap, Kodiak curled at his feet like a living shadow. Every 30 minutes, Wade rose and walked the perimeter of the circular room, flashlight low, checking doors, walls, windows. Nothing had changed, except him. He no longer believed he was alone in this place. Not now, not ever. By sunrise, the air had thickened, not with fog, but with weight, like the mountain itself was holding its breath. He needed answers, not from strangers, not from men whispering through keyholes. He needed them from the one person who had wanted him to come here, Eleanor. And Wade had a feeling those answers weren't just in the letter. They were behind the ice. He made coffee on the old propane stove Eleanor had installed in a stone alcove near the back of the room. The damn thing still worked, barely. Kodiak watched him from the rug, tail twitching, eyes alert. Wade poured the dark liquid into a chipped enamel mug and took a long sip. The second door, the one directly to the left of the fireplace, had slightly thinner ice than the others. He crouched in front of it and studied the surface. Not natural. The ice was smooth but rippled, almost like it had been blown into place, flash frozen over decades. There were strange ridges along the center, faint etchings that looked like letters, not English, not anything he recognized. He ran his hand over the surface, cold pulsed into his fingertips, almost like the door was alive. "Let's see what you're hiding," he muttered. Wade went to the lean-to outside where Eleanor's old tools had been stored under tarp. Frost clung to the wooden handles, but they were intact. He brought in a chisel and a ball-peen hammer. Kodiak followed him silently, staying 3 feet back, nose twitching. Wade positioned the chisel along a hairline fracture in the ice. One solid tap. The sound echoed like a bell in a cave. He tapped again, harder. A sliver of ice fell to the floor and shattered, not like ice usually does, but like crystal. Clear, angular shards scattered across the stone like glass from a windshield. 10 more minutes, 20. Slowly, inch by inch, the ice gave way. And then, finally, a chunk the size of a basketball broke off from the center, revealing the door's lock. It was old. Brass, no keypad, just a circular keyhole with a familiar groove. He pulled Eleanor's black iron key from his pocket, slid it in, turned it once. Click. The door opened. The room beyond was smaller than the main chamber, maybe 10 feet by 10, walls carved from solid rock. One narrow slit window cut high into the stone let in a shaft of dusty morning light. But what stunned Wade most was the scent. Not mold, not decay. Books. Dozens of leather-bound journals lined the walls, stacked neatly on deep wooden shelves. On the far wall, a desk. No computer, just paper, ink, precision. Kodiak stepped in first, tail high. Wade followed, moving slowly. He ran his hand along the shelf. The bindings were labeled in gold ink, dated by year. 1945, 1946, 1947, all the way up through 1998. He pulled one at random, June 12, 1953. He came again today, called himself a collector, but I know what he is, a thief in a tailored coat. Offered me $50,000 for the sapphires. Said he knew where I kept them. Said he had friends in Washington. I laughed in his face. This collection isn't for profit, it's for preservation, for legacy. Wade's hands tightened on the pages. He pulled another journal. May 1947. Acquired Yogo sapphire, 5.3 carats. Clarity, exceptional. Color, cornflower blue. From Rock Creek. Seller unaware of value, logged and stored. Collection now at 47 specimens. I need a secure site soon. Billings' apartment is too exposed. Wade stepped back and took it all in. This wasn't a home. This was a vault. A hidden private museum of one woman's life work, protected not just by ice and pistons, but by silence. Generations of silence. Kodiak's ears perked. Then he turned his head toward the third door. Oh, you see. Just still encased in thick layers of ice. He padded to it, stood still, then sat as if waiting. Wade followed, flashlight beam cutting through the low light. That third door had no etchings, no carvings, no handle, just cold. And something else. A smell, subtle, earthy, like old wood and minerals and something electrical. Wade reached out and touched it again. But this time something gave. A vibration, almost imperceptible, like the door had felt him. A deep hum traveled through his palm, up his arm, and into his chest. Then it stopped. Kodiak growled once, quiet, just enough to say, "We're not ready yet." Wade stepped back. No need to force what wasn't meant to open. Not yet. The rest of the day, Wade cataloged the journals, photographing pages, scanning names. Many were strangers, some weren't. He found entries that mentioned men from his father's unit, maps of Montana marked with red pins and hand-drawn coordinates. A weathered file labeled simply, Carrick Incident 1979. He didn't open it, not yet. Instead, he fed Kodiak, made a fire, and sat on the floor with a handful of notes, the hum of memory in his ears. This wasn't about money, not anymore. It wasn't even about inheritance. It was about protecting what mattered and finishing what Eleanor and his father started. Just before midnight, Kodiak growled again. This time, from the center of the main room, Wade grabbed the rifle. The wind outside had picked up, rattling the windows. Then came the knock. But not at the front door. This time, it was on the side of the house, near the ground-level window that faced the mountain slope. A light flashed once, then off. Wade killed the lantern. They moved together, silent. Kodiak ahead, Wade covering with the rifle. Outside the window, nothing. No figures, no movement. Then he saw it, pressed against the glass. A black card. He reached for it, bit slowly. On the back, printed in small silver letters, "You're not the only one with keys, soldier. Open the third door before we do. J.W." Kodiak barked once, sharp, loud. Wade stepped back and slammed the window shut. He didn't know how Whitmore had come and gone so silently. He didn't know who we was, but he knew this much. That door wasn't going to open for them. Not while he and Kodiak were still breathing. Not without a fight. The wind kicked up a layer of fine dust across the dry ground, rattling the broken shutters of the old garage like bones in a forgotten grave. Cole stood in the silence of the back room, staring at the pile of faded photographs in war medals Lee laid out on the concrete floor. His breath was shallow. The air smelled of motor oil, dried tobacco, and something older, like moldy paper and scorched wood. Shadow, his German Shepherd K9, sat alert beside him, ears perked, his gaze locked on something Cole couldn't see. "Easy, boy," Cole muttered, crouching. He picked up one of the photos, sepia-toned, curled at the edges, showing a group of men in uniform standing in front of the same garage. But behind them, just barely visible, was a symbol on the wall, a star with wings, military, Air Corps maybe. But that wasn't what made Cole's gut twist. It was the man in the middle, same jawline, same eyes. "Dad?" Cole whispered. Shadow let out a low growl. It wasn't a warning growl, more like confusion or discomfort. He stepped forward, nose close to the cracked floorboards, and whimpered. Cole followed his gaze to a dusty tool chest that hadn't been touched in decades. The padlock was rusted shut, but with a flathead screwdriver and some patience, it finally gave way. Inside was a small, velvet-lined box. He opened it and froze. Inside was a medal he'd only seen in history books, the Distinguished Service Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor. And tucked underneath it, a letter, folded, yellowed, but still sealed, addressed simply to my son if he ever comes home. Cole's fingers trembled as he broke the seal. "If you're reading this, then you found the garage. Maybe the war took you like it nearly took me. Maybe life did. Either way, this place, this mess, it's yours now. There's more under the floor. Not money, not weapons, but truth, and maybe truth is the only thing more dangerous than both." There was no signature, just initials, WP, his father's initials, Walter Patterson. Cole sank to the ground, heart racing. He remembered bits and pieces of the man, the firm hand on his shoulder before leaving for deployment, the lingering scent of smoke and pine, the way he'd disappear into silence instead of arguments. He'd never spoken of his time overseas. Only once, in a storm, had Cole heard him cry in the dark. Shadow barked suddenly, one sharp guttural alert. His body stiffened, then turned toward the wall. He started pawing at it, claws scraping the plaster. "What is it, Shadow?" Cole moved closer. The wall was thinner here, different. A tap with a wrench confirmed it. Hollow. He grabbed a crowbar and began pulling it apart. Plaster and wood gave way to a hidden compartment, revealing a narrow crawl space behind the wall. Inside, crates. Military stencils marked them. Property of U.S. Army Ordnance Depot in 1944. Cole yanked one open. Not weapons, not gold. Documents. Maps. Film reels. Photos of underground tunnels, wartime interrogation transcripts. One dossier labeled Operation Emberfall, confidential, eyes only. What the hell was his father into? He carried one file out, laid it on the workbench. The top page read, Report, Civilian Shelter, Conversion, Patterson Automotive, 1953. Location, Wyoming. Purpose, conversion of garage sublevel into safe house for high-risk witnesses under Project Emberfall. Cole blinked. His father hadn't just fixed carburetors and transmissions. He'd built a Cold War bunker for the government. That explained the encrypted lock on the basement door, the military-grade ventilation, the reinforced steel. But why had he never said a word? A memory flashed. Cole was maybe 6 or 7, playing under the workbench. He'd reached for a loose board in the floor and his father had snapped, yelled in a voice so cold it stopped him in his tracks. That was the first and only time his father had ever raised his voice. Now it made sense. Cole flipped through the rest of the documents, heart thudding harder with every page. Operation Emberfall hadn't just been about protection. It was tied to a covert Cold War surveillance program, one that monitored not just foreign operatives but domestic ones, whistleblowers, scientists, even decorated veterans. And one of the names listed as disappeared in 1955, Franklin Marcus Rowe, the same man whose photograph Cole had found behind the drywall yesterday. Rowe had vanished after testifying against a private contractor suspected of funneling chemical weapons data to enemy nations. The FBI had declared it a suicide, case closed. But the report in Cole's hand told a different story. Rowe was placed under witness protection inside the garage's bunker, the same one Cole had just opened. Shadow whined again and nudged a small crate tucked under the bench. Cole opened it. A tape recorder, old school reel-to-reel. Beside it, a single audio reel labeled, "Final Statement, Rowe, do not play unless they find me." Cole exhaled slowly. The air in the room felt heavier now. He threaded the reel through the machine, clicked it on. Static, then a shaky voice. "This is Franklin Rowe. If you're hearing this, it means I've failed. They know. They've always known. Patterson tried to help me, but it's bigger than him. Bigger than both of us. They used the war as cover. They used us as pawns. If they find me, it'll look like suicide. It always does." Then silence. Cole sat frozen. He looked down at Shadow, who stared up at him like he already knew what was coming next. There was a storm brewing, not of rain, but of truths buried deep and the ghosts of men who never got to finish their stories. And Cole, alongside a loyal German shepherd and the secrets of a father he never truly knew, was about to finish it for them. It started with a low growl. Thor stiffened first, hackles raised, amber eyes locked on the wind-blown barn door. The night had gone unnaturally quiet. No crickets, no frogs, just the sound of distant thunder rolling in like a warning drum. Darren tightened his grip on the flashlight, its beam slicing through dust and tension. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, crouching beside his canine partner. Thor didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. Outside, the Montana wind screamed across the prairie, shaking the old barn's weathered boards. They'd returned to the cabin that afternoon, determined to face what had been circling them for weeks. Something or someone had been watching them, messing with the cabin. The scratches on the old storm shelter's door weren't from raccoons. The broken lock on the shed wasn't caused by weather. And now, this. Darren moved toward the door slowly, knees aching, his sidearm heavy on his hip. Thor advanced with him, muscles coiled tight. Thunder cracked again. Closer this time. He flung open the barn door. Nothing, just fields swaying in the storm wind. The distant ridge blurred in fog. Darren exhaled, and then a gunshot rang out. It exploded the silence like glass shattering. Darren dove behind a stack of hay bales, Thor already beside him. Another shot, closer. Splinters of wood flew from the barn wall. They were being fired on. "Back to the house," Darren barked. Thor didn't need telling twice. They sprinted through the rain, boots pounding wet earth, the porch light flickering in the distance like a lifeline. Another shot whizzed past, grazing the porch post. As if Darren threw himself through the door and slammed it shut. He dropped to the floor, breath heaving, heart racing like a freight train. "Who the hell?" he muttered, eyes scanning the windows. Thor whined, alert but waiting for orders. Darren killed the lights and crawled to the side window, peering out through a slit in the curtain. The rain made everything hazy, but he saw movement. Two figures crouched near the barn, armed. They weren't kids or pranksters. They were professionals. The storm raged overhead, but inside the cabin, silence reigned. Darren moved methodically, checking locks, pulling down blackout blinds, loading the Winchester. He didn't know how long they had, minutes maybe. He found himself in front of the old trunk in the living room again. The one with his father's military medals. The one with the letter. He hesitated, then opened it. There, beneath the folded flag, lay a sealed manila envelope. Not the one he'd read weeks ago. This one had his name scrawled on it, in his father's shaky handwriting. "If you're reading this, son, they found you." Darren's blood ran cold. Inside was a map, crude, hand-drawn, but unmistakably of the land they were standing on. The cabin, the barn, the old storm shelter. But behind the barn, there was another mark, one he'd never seen before. A red X, and a note beneath it, buried proof. They didn't wait until daylight. At first light, Darren and Thor moved silently toward the X. The rain had turned the field into mush, but the soil gave easily beneath the shovel. Thor paced nearby, ears perked, nose twitching as Darren dug faster, adrenaline overriding exhaustion. Then, metal. A dull clunk. He unearthed a rusted lockbox. Inside, files, faded photos, names, and a black and white picture of a young soldier, Darren's father, standing beside a smiling man in a white uniform. Except that man wasn't just anyone. He was the senator currently running for re-election, a man with deep defense contracts, a man who'd recently fought to claim eminent domain Orsine over Darren's land for federal infrastructure. Darren stared at the photo, stunned. His father had written something on the back. He made a deal. He thought no one would find out, but I kept everything. It all made sense now. The attacks, the break-ins, the threats, they weren't random. Someone was trying to bury the past and anyone who stood in the way. Darren returned to the cabin and scanned the documents. There were contracts, declassified memos, and one letter addressed to a Colonel A. Bristow. The contents were chilling, confirmation of an off-the-books operation that left civilians dead in a foreign village, and names, American names, linked to the operation, including the senators. Darren's hands trembled. His father had tried to go public once. The article had been killed. The reporter disappeared. The land was the last piece, buried secrets, literally. Now they were exposed. By sunset, Darren had a plan. He packed the files, the map, and a USB stick into a waterproof pouch. They'd go to a friend of his, Rico, a retired journalist turned podcaster with a big audience and nothing left to lose. Darren didn't trust the police, and he couldn't wait for the courts. This needed to go public. Thor stayed very close the entire time, sensing the storm wasn't over yet. That night, as Darren prepped the truck, he noticed something strange. The barn light was on. He hadn't turned it on. He grabbed the rifle and whispered, "Stay." But Thor growled low and followed anyway. As they neared the barn, a figure stepped out into the doorway. Darren raised his gun, but the figure didn't move. Then he heard it, a sharp whistle. Thor barked and lunged forward, but skidded to a stop halfway, body stiff. He'd been trained with that whistle. Someone from the unit. Someone from his past. Darren's breath caught. "Show yourself," he shouted. The figure stepped forward slowly, hands raised. It was Jennings, Sergeant Mark Jennings, long thought dead, buried in the same mission Darren's father had tried to expose. Except he wasn't dead, and now he was here. "Easy, Darren," Jennings said, voice like gravel. "I'm not here to kill you." "Then why are you here?" Darren demanded, not lowering the weapon. Jennings looked at Thor, then back at Darren. "Because if you go public with that, they'll kill you." The old man hadn't spoken in hours. He just sat there on the worn porch swing, hands folded tight like he was praying to the splintered wood beneath him. The letter was still in his shirt pocket, creased, yellowed, the kind of paper that remembered everything. A slow wind combed the dust across the cabin's front yard, kicking grit against the porch posts and brushing against the rusted grill of the old '72 Chevy truck out front. Bravo, the K9, stood watch just a few feet away, never letting the man drift too far. He seemed to sense that something deeper than silence had settled in the man's chest. Inside the cabin, everything was still the same, almost too much the same. Liam stood by the cracked window with the envelope in his hand. He hadn't dared open it yet. His father had handed it to him without a word that morning, right after the two of them had returned from burying the last of the bones out by the ridge. "What's in it?" Ellie had asked softly, curled up in a wool blanket on the couch beside Bravo's crate. Her eyes were wide but calm. She didn't cry anymore. Not after last night. Liam shook his head. He didn't say. Ellie glanced toward the porch. "He's scared." Liam gave a tired nod. "Yeah, and I think I know why." He didn't open the letter right away. Instead, he waited until night fell, and the lantern over the kitchen table threw a flickering gold across the rough wood. Ellie had fallen asleep again, Bravo curled tightly beside her. With a deep breath, Liam broke the wax seal. The handwriting was old, sharp, precise. "If you're reading this, then the war I brought home finally caught up with me." Liam blinked. He hadn't expected his father to be so clear. "I wasn't a good man after the army. I buried too much, saw too much. When your mom passed, I didn't know how to hold you, son, so I held the bottle instead. And when they gave me that cabin out in the middle of nowhere, I thought it was a punishment. But maybe it was grace, because that's where I found something I never told anyone about. Not even your uncle." Liam stopped reading. His hands were shaking. Outside, the porch swing creaked. That place? It's not just an old shelter. It was a fail-safe, built in the early '60s by a man named Colton Vance, a contractor for the DOD. The cabin was just a cover for what he stashed down there, documents, weapons, maybe money, I don't know. But I sealed it, swore I'd never use it, until now. Liam dropped the letter to the table like it was hot steel. For a moment, everything inside him went still. It wasn't just an old bunker. His father had been hiding a Cold War relic, and now Liam was standing at the center of it. The next morning, the sun barely crested over the hills when the hum of a drone broke the silence. Liam shot to his feet and pulled Ellie toward the bedroom. "Stay down. Don't come out unless I say." Bravo growled low, pacing toward the door. It was too soon. They'd only just buried what they found, and that meant whoever had been watching the land, they were coming back. Liam grabbed the shotgun from above the mantel and stepped out. His dad was already standing by the gate, rifle slung over his shoulder like the Vietnam years hadn't touched him. "How many?" Liam asked. "Two black SUVs, 3 men each," the old man said flatly. "Coming slow, like they owned the place." Liam clenched his jaw. "You think they know about the letter?" His father gave a crooked grin. "They knew before I mailed it." The men arrived without sirens, but their suits said they weren't here for polite questions. One stepped out first, tall, clean-shaven, and smug. His voice was smooth as butter on burnt toast. "Mr. Hollis," he said, "we believe you have something that belongs to the department." Liam raised an eyebrow. "Like what? An old outhouse and a few acres of broken pine?" The man smiled. "A vault, with enough pre-war intel to make 4 governments nervous." Bravo snarled behind Liam's leg, his fur bristling. The man didn't flinch. "I don't know what you're talking about," Liam said, "but if I did, you'd have a warrant." "Warrants are for civilians," the man said coldly, "and this is a federal matter." Liam glanced sideways at his father. The old man's finger tightened on the trigger. "Son," he said without looking, "get the girl and the dog inside. I'm not leaving you out here alone." I said go. The voice had that same command it used to have in war zones and backyards alike. Liam turned, heart pounding, and sprinted back inside. He didn't see what happened next, but he heard it. 2 shots, 1 shout, and then silence. When he came back out, the men were gone. So was his father. And all that remained was the sealed hatch in the woods, still untouched. 2 days later, after the sheriff agreed to look the other way and the SUVs never showed up again, Liam finally opened the vault beneath the cabin. Bravo led the way, nose sharp, every step careful. The stairs creaked as if waking after a long sleep. Inside, the room was lined with crates, maps, bundles of bills from another decade. More than that, there were files, sealed folders marked with stamps Liam didn't recognize. One even had his father's name. At the center of the room was a chest, old brass, heavy. Liam opened it slowly. Inside were medals, letters, and one thing that stopped him cold. A photograph. His father, younger, smiling, standing beside a man in uniform. Not just any uniform, but one with stars on the collar and a nameplate that read Colton Vance. Liam realized then this wasn't just some accident. His father had been trusted, entrusted, and now so was he. He closed the chest, turned to Bravo and whispered, "Guess we're not done yet, partner." Bravo barked once, low and steady. Ishtir. Out in the clearing, the wind shifted, the silence had passed. And now came the legacy. The farmhouse stood quiet, save for the faint rustle of leaves and the wind brushing across the porch. Noah sat on the creaky swing, his cane leaning beside him, a coffee cup cupped in his hands. Thor, his German Shepherd K9, now grayer around the muzzle, lay at his feet, eyes scanning the fields with the same alertness he had on patrol years ago. They weren't soldiers anymore, not officially, but the instincts never left. Ever since the confrontation and the shocking truth of the underground facility beneath the barn was exposed, things had changed. Fast. The authorities took control of the site, sectioned it off, and shipped out the remains of the Cold War surveillance bunker. Government agents came and went, but no one could give Noah or his grandson, Jake, a straight answer about why the bunker had been buried and forgotten, or if it had ever truly been declassified. But in all the noise, all the chaos, Noah found something more powerful than answers. He found family again. Jake, who once avoided anything to do with the farm, now came out every weekend. He mowed the yard. He replaced fence posts. He asked questions about the dog unit Noah once served in, and even read Thor's training log from back when the dog was in active service. They talked, not just about the past, but about the future. One morning, Jake handed him a folded letter. It was from the Veterans Heritage Foundation. "Dear Mr. Walker," it began, "we were contacted regarding your service and the discovery on your property. In honor of your legacy and that of your canine partner, we would like to offer support in converting the Walker Farm into a historical preservation site." Noah lowered the letter and looked at Jake, stunned. "You did this?" Jake just shrugged, eyes on the horizon. "You saved people, Pop. And that dog of yours probably saved a dozen more. This place deserves to tell its story." It wasn't the kind of recognition Noah ever asked for, but maybe it was the kind he needed. The weeks that followed felt like a second chapter. Old Army friends reached out. One of them, Tom Harrow, came with a box of medals and patches Noah hadn't seen in decades. They stood in the barn, now cleared of all remnants of the Cold War, and Tom ran his fingers across the concrete floor where the hidden hatch had once been. "You remember March of '92? Tom asked. Noah chuckled. "That blizzard barely got the K-9 unit back to base." Tom nodded. That storm buried more than snow. It buried truth. They didn't talk much more after that. They didn't need to. Veterans had a way of speaking with silence. A month later, Jake invited the local high school history class to the farm. Noah stood under the big oak tree and told them stories. Not war stories, not the ones about death and explosions, but about duty, about listening to your gut, and about a dog who could read a human heart better than most people ever could. Thor sat beside him the whole time, ears perked up like he understood every word. After the kids left, one girl came back alone. Her name was Lily. She asked if she could volunteer at the new museum once it was built. "My dad's a vet too," she said, "and he doesn't talk about it much. But I think stories like yours help people like him feel seen." Noah didn't answer right away. He just nodded and handed her a faded patch from his jacket. The insignia was frayed, the lettering almost gone, but the emblem of the K-9 unit still shone. "Then keep this safe," he said. By fall, a small building stood next to the barn, outfitted with simple exhibits. Photos of Thor and Noah on patrol, maps of the surveillance systems hidden under the property, and recordings of declassified transmissions from the Cold War. But the real heart of the museum was Thor. They gave him a corner with a soft bed, his service vest on display beside him, and a steady stream of visitors who came not just to learn, but to honor. One morning, a woman in a tailored suit arrived. She introduced herself as Claire Benton, daughter of one of the engineers who once worked on the buried facility. "My father never came home from that job," she said quietly. "They said he died in a car crash. But there were always questions." She held up a faded photo. It showed a man standing near the hatch with a shepherd beside him. Thor growled softly, a low sound, not hostile but recognizing. Claire knelt beside him, tears in her eyes. "Maybe now I can believe he didn't die for nothing." Noah didn't say much. He just rested a hand on her shoulder. That moment was bigger than the Cold War, bigger than secrets. It was legacy. That night, Noah stood at the edge of the field. Jake was on the porch, strumming a guitar gently. The sun dipped behind the hills, casting the whole farm in amber. "Funny how things work out," Noah murmured. Thor leaned into his leg. Noah looked down and gave him a soft smile. "You and me, buddy, we didn't just find secrets. We found something worth keeping alive." And in that quiet dusk, with the farmhouse behind them and the wind carrying the sound of the past and future all at once, Noah realized something. A man and his dog might not change the world, but sometimes they uncover the parts of it that were never meant to be forgotten.